If you've ever wondered whether you're neurodivergent or just felt like you see the world a little differently, you're not alone. I was diagnosed autistic at 25, and suddenly, so many things I never had words for started to make sense. Here, I share the good, the bad, the ugly, and the beautiful parts of life through an autistic lens. My name is Elena Carroll, and if you're looking for answers, understanding, or just an autistic friend, you're in the right place. When stressed, Elena is likely to react with irritability. Others will perceive her to be impatient, easily frustrated, and demanding. At times, she may also become volatile and lash out at those who she views as the source of her frustration. This pattern will result in potential chaos in relationships, and close relationships are likely to be problematic. Interpersonally, Elena has little self-confidence in social interactions, and this is compounded by a struggle to invest in relationships. This is an actual piece of writing that was written in my diagnosis report for autism a few years ago, and while it may sound incredibly harsh, it has shown up to be very accurate and true for my life. I don't think that any relationship in my life has been easy. With my family members, with romantic partners, with friends, it's all been extremely complicated, extremely nuanced. In my time, I have cycled through more friendships than I have actually maintained, and this is a piece of my life that I have kind of talked about, I've touched on in my videos before, but it's something that I am incredibly aware of, perhaps a little bit embarrassed about, but I think that in order for me to grow, in order for me to kind of take charge of myself and my life, I have to acknowledge what patterns are reoccurring, try and find meaning behind it all. While I have gone through a lot of friendships in my time, I think that, not all of them have ended due to really negative, toxic reasons. I think some have naturally drifted through age and through changing, and I think that's a natural part of life, and I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this. I'm sure that we can all agree that we are not the same people as we were when we were like 12 to 15 years old, and so those friendships just naturally evolve, and you either grow with the people or you don't. I think more specifically what I'm talking about is the friendships that I have made in early adulthood. What is becoming very evident to me is I have very bad luck or bad taste in choosing the friends that I have chosen. I think that I have gone for friends that are unable or unwilling to show up in the ways that I would show up for them, and perhaps very selfish people. I think that I have gone for very, very selfish people. I think I've talked about this in a video in the past. I can relate to people who have been through kind of some sort of trauma. For me, the dark, heavy parts of life are what makes sense to my brain because I also have been through that. I don't really know how to relate to people who haven't been through something. But unfortunately, what happens when you befriend someone who has a lot of trauma, not always, might I add, not always. I myself am a living example of this, but a lot of the times, a lot of traumatized people can be very unhealed people, and that can mean that their focus is more or less on themselves and not on, really tending to another person. I am a big believer of, patterns resurfacing again and again, time and time again, until you actually acknowledge what is going on and actually really learn the lesson that you are meant to learn. So I think for me, I have only just started to catch on that this has become a pattern of my life. Something that I think has played a massive part in this experience, in this problem for me in my life, is that I have prided myself in being kind of the yes friend. I have prided myself in being the easy, relaxed, down for anything kind of friend. And while I am typically a very, very relaxed person and I'm up for a lot of things, what this doesn't allow for is when you decide you don't want to do things, or when things are in the too hard basket, it feels a little bit too much, a little bit too demanding. And if you are only the yes friend, you can't ever say no. And this was my problem. I would just say yes and yes and yes and put myself probably into this box of being this particular person, priding myself, finding worth as a friend in this box. And then when I needed to get out of that, because no human can remain in the same state always, I can't always be saying yes, I can't always be easygoing. When that would happen and I would change up, most of the time, because the friends that I was choosing were very, very selfish and self-absorbed people, they didn't know what to do with that. They didn't know what to do with the change up of my character or me kind of not complying to what they wanted. And so that often resulted in some kind of fallout, whether that be an argument, whether that be raising their voice, whether that be them pushing back on me, and I couldn't take the conflict. And so most of the time I take accountability for this, but I wouldn't want to resolve the friendship at that point. Once I felt like they were seeing me in a different way or they had raised their voice at me, I don't do conflict. And so I would often walk away and not feel any ounce of sadness around it. I would just move on to the next. And what I'm noticing is this is clearly a pattern, and clearly the choices that I'm making, and clearly the way that I am viewing friendships has been really skewed. And I've got the evidence in that report. And so I kind of want to get into this a little bit more today. Why autistic people fail in female friendships. In this video, I am going to be kind of getting into the social aspects of friendship, the masking, the role that mothers play, early socialization, and the internal experience that all play a part into the failing and the nuanced experiences of female friendships. So let's start out with the social expectations and the gendered friendship norms. If you are a female, it is probably very evident to you how nuanced, how many expectations often show up in female friendships. And when I am talking about, female friendships, this is obviously a generalization. This does not apply to every single female friendship. I have had a really healthy female friendship modeled to me in my life by my mother, which I will be getting into a little bit later. So I know that it does exist, but this is just the typical stereotype experience of a female friendship. I think the biggest point that I want to make here is there is often a lot of emotional reciprocity needed, wanted in a female friendship. I think we focus a lot on our emotions and what's going on in our life, and we kind of perhaps expect the friend in our life, the closest friend in our life, to consistently be showing up for us in that way. And that often doesn't leave a lot of room for people who are neurodivergent, who need a lot of time on their own to kind of tune out the world and tune out our brains. There's a lot of small talk and social bonding, and a big focus is communication, which, as a lot of us do know, that can be really taxing. No matter how much we love and care for the person, it does get hard to do hours and hours on end every single day of the week, if that is expected. Just to give you guys an example here of the kinds of expectations that might be expected in a female friendship. My mum has always told me this story, every time I was struggling with friendships. She told me the story of a friend she had in high school, and the two of them were thick as thieves. They did every single thing together, but this friend of hers was very, codependent to my mum. She really didn't know how to almost survive without my mum. And so one day my mum decided to cut off her hair. She had very, very long hair, dark hair like I do currently. And she decided one day that she was going to, chop it all off. And so this was something that a decision she made on her own because it's her own hair. And so I guess one day she showed up and saw her friend with her hair redone, and the friend lost it at my mum because she felt that this was such a big decision in my mum's life that she should have come to this friend and told her about it and told her thoughts and involved her in the process. The expectations of this friendship for her friend were a lot higher than what my mum was perhaps willing to give. And because she had her own autonomy, my mum is a very stubborn, autonomous woman. She didn't want to be told that she had to do something for somebody else in that way. And so the friendship ultimately failed. My mum is also autistic, so if that gives you any idea, she is very, very stubborn. I think the key difference here with neurotypical and autistic friendship expectations is that autistic people really struggle with the communication part. We do communicate really differently, and we may prefer direct communication. We may struggle with the constant emotional labor that is often involved in these female friendships. Something that you might want is you want the quality over quantity. So you want the times that you do share with your friends to be really impactful and really special and really meaningful, and less about the constant check-ins. But I think society places a lot of pressure on female friendships to be these constant check-ins, these constant updates, the gossiping, and this emotional performance, which can be really hard for us to keep up with. Next up, we come to masking and social exhaustion. This is a massive one when it comes to, maintaining friendships in general, particularly if you are a neurodivergent girl with a neurotypical friend. This can be hard. Worthwhile and totally amazing friendships can exist in this, of course. But if you are not on the same page and you don't trust this person, it can be really, really hard. Masking, of course, is basically trying to perform, keep up with neurotypical behaviors to avoid judgment and trying to fit in as best you can, even though your neurology doesn't allow for you to kind of keep up with these social acts. This has always been a big part of my downfall in friendships. Of course, we know that masking of any kind in any area of life, of course, leads to emotional burnout. But I think the biggest one is it does create a little bit of inauthenticity that people can pick up on. Ultimately, if you are agreeing to things just for the sake of agreeing, your heart isn't in it. And so the other person definitely may pick up on the fact that you might not want to be there, or you don't actually want to be doing this thing, and they may themselves internalize that you're not actually that invested in the friendship, you're not actually feeling that close to the person, and so they might get their back up too. I think people can perceive this inauthenticity as inconsistent, also really distant behavior, because if you're really not wanting to jump for joy and do this thing that you've been asked to do but agreed to do just because you're masking, then you're really not going to have a lot of enthusiasm. Or at the very least, you're just masking the enthusiasm. It's not authentic and it's not real. And I think that this is a really big downfall in my friendships, as I said, because suddenly when I do start to show that I'm not really feeling this, people don't understand. My behavior must appear really inconsistent. There must be a bit of a disconnect from who I portrayed myself to be, perhaps at the beginning of the friendship, to the point where I'm starting to feel comfortable and starting to show my real self, and they don't know this person. And think about it, if you spend all of your energy trying to perform in the friendship, trying to actually be normal, then when it comes time to actually connect as a friend, you don't have any energy left to give. So by that point, it's not actually an enjoyable experience, which is the point of what friendship is meant to be, something that is authentic. It's meant to be something lighthearted, and it takes you out of your everyday life and allows for you to let go of some burdens with someone you trust. I think that a lot of us actually forget the point of friendships because we're too busy trying to perform it and trying to act as normal as we can. Next, we come to internal experience and emotional processing. If you are autistic and you have had a long line of failed relationships, friendships, whatever, I'm sure that you can definitely relate to the experience of ruminating, of having a conversation with someone, going back, dwelling on what was said, what you could have said differently, what you could have said better, and trying to incorporate almost script the next time you see them. There's a lot of overthinking and there's a lot of hyper awareness of ourselves. And so again, that doesn't allow for ourselves to show up mindfully in a relationship. This is an extreme kind of worrying, and how this can show up in friendships is a lot of over apologizing, overreacting or underreacting, that the person is so confused what it is that you're actually feeling. They don't understand because your emotions don't match the situation, or it might be a lot of distant behavior. And I want to give you guys an example of this. I had a friend of mine who I am no longer friends with. This was not the reason that our friendship ended. And at the time, she was dating someone that I definitely knew was not the person for her. I really, really struggled to hear about this person and support her choices with this person, because I knew immediately, like, this is not something that you should be doing. These are not choices that you should be making. I understand now that everyone goes through their own journey, and it's not up to me to tell someone the lessons they need to learn. It's up to them to learn the lessons, just as I would like that autonomy, to live my life. And so at the time, without knowing more about myself and these lessons that I am talking to you guys about, I basically took on the words of, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. And so I didn't. I removed myself from the friendship for about a month, and I just wanted to let her make the decision she wanted to make, because I didn't know what to say to her. And eventually we came back around and had a conversation, and I told her this, and she said she just wanted me there to be her friend to talk to while she was figuring this out. And I was able to do that. But I think that this is such a prime example of really being unsure of how to navigate a situation that, doesn't make sense to me and my black and white way of thinking. It has its very negative tendency sometimes. Next, we come to the role of mothers in early socialization. And I have seen this play out not only in my own life, but in one friend in particular I am thinking of when I talk about this point. I think that mothers, or a mother figure, or any female we were around as children, definitely set the tone of what we expect friendships to be. We learn the kind of friendship dynamics of what that looks like, and I definitely had this modeled to me in such a healthy way. As I talked about in the beginning, my mum had a friend who ultimately I think was verging on family for me. The thing that I really admired about their friendship was that they each had their own lives, their own families. These didn't look the exact same, and they lived their lives pretty differently. They each had their own friend groups, but they both knew that the other was their best friend, and that they could always come to the other no matter what was going on. And so they didn't see each other all the time, and they didn't communicate all the time. When they did catch up, it was that quality, not the quantity. They really modeled to me this loyalty and this trust and this friendship that went on for over 30 years before this friend actually passed away a few years ago. This friend of my mum's, she had cancer, and she knew that her life was coming to an end. And at the time, my mum was going to be moving away. And so they had one final glass of wine together. And my mum told me that they just hugged it out, and they cried, and they said goodbye, just as they said goodbye at any other time. And there was no big words. They weren't, two gushy people. They just knew what their friendship had been. And I think it's just this quiet trust of the other. I've always been looking for my version of this friendship. And I haven't found that yet. I just want to encourage you guys with this, because my mum was in her mid to late 20s when she met this friend, and she's always told me that sometimes the best friends that you make for life often come later on, when you know yourself a lot more, and you know what brain you're dealing with, and who you are, and you can show up more authentically in these friendships when you know this part of yourself. And so for those of you who haven't met that lifelong friend yet, it doesn't say that it's not going to happen. Some tips that I want to leave you guys with to try and help you in this process of finding friends. I think the first point that I want to make here is start seeking friends who actually respect and accept your direct communication, and actually give you the direct communication that your brain needs. I'm someone that loves, really good time management, because it helps ease my anxiety a little bit more. I hate uncertainty, and I hate when friends have shown up for me in the past by basically not showing up for me in conversation. If they say, like, let's hang out on Sunday, and then Sunday comes and they don't message and I'm messaging them and it goes hours and hours of them not actually responding to me, I don't know how to do that. And so now, as I've gotten older, I've realized I actually need to find people who are on the same wavelength with communication and directness and actually respect that. The next point is actually start to honor your energy levels. It's actually okay to miss social events, and I think that the real and true friend will accept that and understand that. Just a few weeks ago, I had to miss Thanksgiving, which this is my last Thanksgiving here in Canada, and I was going to be joining a friend of mine and her family because it's not something that I've ever celebrated before. And at the time, I was actually going through burnout. I actually talked about it in my video last week, and so I ended up cancelling on her, and it's not something that I take lightly. I don't like to let people down, but I'm also trying to practice a little bit more authentic communication and expression. And she was like, totally understand, I hope you feel better and I'll bring you back some pumpkin pie. And that's exactly what happened. This is definitely something I'm now looking for in friendships, is just that understanding of what I go through as an autistic woman. I've said it throughout this video, but focus on quality and not quantity. It's totally okay to have 2 friends over an entire group. I think that society places a lot of emphasis on having so many friends and being Miss Popular and whatever, and you can have every friend there is, 12 friends, whatever, and really not actually feel connected to any one of them. You want to feel as though you can call someone up in your darkest of days and they are going to be there. So really just focus on just a couple, even one. Also, I want to end on saying focus on setting those boundaries and prioritizing your emotional labor. How much are you having to work for this friendship? Don't do what I have done in the past, which is leaving it too late to set those boundaries that the other person is confused why you're suddenly setting them. Set them early on so you are actually creating the narrative that you want moving forward for this friendship. Because then when you do decide to actually implement those boundaries, they're not going to be confused and throw a tantrum like friends of mine in the past have done. And just in case you need this reminder, you're actually allowed to set those boundaries. And I hope that acts as a bit of encouragement for you guys. I really hope that this was an informative video, maybe an introduction into the thinking behind why friendships have failed for you, and start getting more specific on maybe particular patterns. I think the more we try and understand what goes wrong in our lives, the more we can start to change and create what we want. And that's what I'm trying to do moving forward. So with that, I am going to leave it there. Thank you guys so much for listening to me speak today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you guys. In case you want any more internet friends, I have my social medias always linked down below. So I would love to chat to you guys. And I hope you have a fabulous morning or night wherever you are in the world. And I'll talk to you very soon. Bye. Mwah.